George Harrison was not the kind of man who cut people off lightly. If anything, he was known for patience, for quiet understanding, for letting things pass that might have pushed someone else into anger. He had lived through too much to react quickly. Fame, betrayal, loss, pressure. He absorbed it all with a kind of stillness that made people underestimate him. But there was a line, and when that line was crossed, there was no coming back, no confrontation, no shouting, no dramatic ending, just silence, permanent, cold, and absolute. To understand why he reached that point, you have to go back to the beginning, long before the fame, before the music changed the world. He was born into a life that didn't promise anything extraordinary. Small spaces, shared rooms, and a constant awareness that nothing came easy. That kind of upbringing shapes a person in ways that never fully disappear. It teaches you who to trust, how to survive disappointment, and most importantly, how to recognize when someone has taken more from you than they deserve. As a young boy, George wasn't loud or attention-seeking. He observed more than he spoke. While others pushed forward, he stayed back, studying people, learning their patterns. That quiet nature followed him into his teenage years, even as music started to take over his life. When he picked up a guitar, it wasn't just a hobby. It became a way out, a path forward, something that felt entirely his. And he held on to it tightly because it was one of the few things no one could take from him. But success changes everything. When he joined the band that would later dominate the world, he stepped into a storm he could never have fully imagined. Fame came fast, louder and more overwhelming than anything he had known. Suddenly, privacy disappeared. Every move was watched, every word analyzed. And inside that chaos, relationships became complicated, not just with fans or the industry, but with the people closest to him. He found himself surrounded by strong personalities, voices that demanded attention, and often took up all the space in the room. While others led conversations and decisions, George stood back, contributing quietly, sometimes feeling like an outsider in his own world. His ideas were often pushed aside, his creativity underestimated. And yet he stayed. He kept writing, kept playing, kept waiting for his moment to be heard. That patience, though, came at a cost. Over time, frustration built beneath the surface. It wasn't explosive or obvious, but was there, growing slowly. He began to realize that loyalty didn't always guarantee respect. That being close to someone didn't mean they truly understood you. And still, he gave people chances, again and again. His personal life mirrored that same pattern. He trusted deeply, loved deeply, and believed that those closest to him would honor that trust. But life has a way of testing those beliefs. Relationships became strained, complicated by fame, distance, and temptation. Lines blurred, boundaries were crossed. And George, true to his nature, didn't always react immediately. He watched, he processed, he waited, then came the betrayal. It didn't happen loudly. There was no single dramatic moment where everything shattered at once. Instead, it unfolded quietly, almost invisibly at first. A shift in behavior, a change in tone, something that didn't feel right, even if it couldn't be fully explained yet. The kind of feeling you try to ignore, because acknowledging it would mean accepting something you don't want to believe. The person at the center of it all wasn't a stranger. That's what made it worse. This was someone who had been trusted, welcomed, treated like family. Someone who had shared moments, conversations, laughter. Someone who had sat across from him, looked him in the eye, and acted as if nothing was wrong. But something was very wrong. When the truth finally surfaced, it didn't come with clarity or closure. It came with a sting that cut deeper than anything he had faced before. Because it wasn't just about what had been done. It was about how it had been done, behind his back. Quietly, repeatedly, while maintaining the appearance of loyalty. For George, that kind of betrayal wasn't something you could fix with an apology. It wasn't something that could be talked through or explained away. It struck at the core of who he was, at the values he held on to despite everything he had experienced. Trust, once broken in that way, didn't repair itself. It simply disappeared. And when it did, so did he. There was no confrontation, no dramatic fallout. He didn't raise his voice or demand answers. Instead, he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He cut that person off completely. No calls, no meetings, no acknowledgement. It was as if they no longer existed. People around him noticed. Of course, questions were asked. Attempts were made to understand what had happened. But George didn't offer much explanation. He didn't need to. To him, the situation was clear. A line had been crossed. And once that happened, there was nothing left to discuss. What made it even more striking was how final it was. Years passed, and the silence remained. No reconciliation. No attempts to rebuild the relationship. Even as time softened other conflicts in his life, this one stayed frozen. It wasn't about holding a grudge. It was about principle. For someone who had forgiven so much, endured so much, this was different. The reason behind it continued to circulate among those who knew the story. Some spoke about betrayal in personal relationships. Others hinted at deeper emotional wounds. But what remained consistent was the understanding that it wasn't a small mistake. It wasn't something accidental or misunderstood. It was deliberate, and that made all the difference. George had spent his life learning when to walk away. From toxic environments, from situations that stifled him, from expectations that didn't align with who he was becoming. This was no different, except for one thing. It involved someone he had once trusted completely, and that made the decision both simple and painful at the same time. He didn't talk about it much in public. That wasn't his style. He preferred to keep certain things private, to process them internally rather than turn them into spectacle. But those who paid attention could see it in his actions. The absence of that person in his life spoke louder than any explanation ever could. What's remarkable is that he didn't let it harden him entirely. He didn't become bitter or closed off to the world. He continued to grow, to explore spirituality, to seek peace in ways that went beyond fame or success. But there was a boundary now, clearer than ever before, and once crossed, it stayed closed. In the years that followed, George focused on what mattered to him. Music, yes, but also something deeper. A search for meaning, for understanding, for a sense of connection that went beyond the surface-level relationships that had once defined his world. He had seen too much, experienced too much, to settle for anything less than authenticity. That betrayal became part of his story, even if he didn't openly discuss it. It shaped the way he approached people, the way he measured trust. It reinforced something he had learned long ago, that not everyone who stands beside you truly stands with you. And sometimes, the only way to protect yourself is to walk away without looking back. The silence he chose wasn't weakness. It wasn't avoidance. It was control. It was a decision to no longer give energy to something that had already taken too much. And in that silence, there was a kind of strength that few people fully understood. Because cutting someone off completely isn't easy, especially when history is involved. It requires certainty, clarity, and the willingness to accept that some relationships don't get a second chance. George Harrison understood that better than most. And once he made that choice, he never broke it. Not once.